And welcome to another Round the Rotary podcast with your host, J.P. Warren, that's me. And Round the Rotary podcast is brought to you by Capital Petroleum Consultants. CPC specializes in project engineering and well site supervision in all disciplines of the oil and gas industry. Contact us through www.capitalpetroleumconsultants.com to see what CPC can do for you today. And today in the studio, sitting across from me today, we have Jonathan Rhoads, partner at Lowry Rhoads Associates, which is an executive search and human capital consultancy. How you doing today, Jonathan?
Doing well, JP.
Man, I'm glad you're here. I think, so you and I have known each other for several years now, and I think you reached out to me and we just started talking. I think you have some pretty good points right now, pretty relevant too with what's going on in the industry right now, with a lot of people kind of facing crossroads in their careers, or they find themselves in an unfortunate circumstance where they don't have a job right now and they're looking right now, and there's a flood and a pool of people, talented people right now out there looking.
Absolutely.
And it's one of those things now, it's like, okay, so you're in here right now today to kind of go over several key points. So you wrote a couple of talking points that usually I kind of like getting off script a little bit, but I think you have a lot of good points.
All right.
And I kind of want to stick to it, if that's all right with you. And we can kind of,
let's roll with it.
If we find a tangent, we can kind of go off on that and kind of do our thing, but let's just kind of, I guess, get this kicked off and give us a quick background about yourself, kind of the elevator summary before we get into the good stuff.
Yeah, sure. I work with companies primarily actually now in energy, chemicals, and nonprofits to find the right leadership people or build them yourself. Got an unusual oil field background that's kind of been a lot of sales leadership and a lot of human capital, organizational development, leadership development. I was fortunate enough to get started at NOV right when their insane acquisition growth boom was going on.
Okay.
So especially there 2010, 11, 12, when we were doing 40, 50 acquisitions a year, I was flying all around the world and helping to figure out how we're going to integrate all those sales forces and train up and build the sales leaders.
How to kind of merge all the cultures.
Right, yeah, and especially a lot of it, what it was is, and this should actually probably, if somebody's listening to this thinking about, hey, I heard there's some career advice stuff in here, is we'd go buy, for every $2 billion mega acquisition you ever heard of, there were tons of 10 million, 30 million smaller ones. So we'd go buy organizations that, say maybe made a really great at XYZ valve in a pump system. And so their organization, their sales leaders, their salespeople were good at selling that valve, selling that widget. Well, now you're part of NOV, right? We don't sell a valve, we sell systems.
Yeah. And
that's an entirely different sale, entirely different value proposition, maybe different person. So you've got that times, like I said, 30, 40, 50 acquisitions a year times, what was it, 115 countries going around. So how we bring people into the fold to be able to be, obviously within your business unit, which I think there were 28 at the time, okay, how do you sell what we're selling, and then as well as all that, but okay, now we've also, when you buy a company, you're buying talent pipeline, how do I identify who the outstanding stars are in these organizations? And
it's going to be such a challenge, though, kind of going in and finding all these different companies, that are being acquired, and kind of getting everyone get in line and walk to the same beat, the same goal.
It is, and the guys who had to do it, obviously from the finance department and the strategy side, I think that's probably the tougher job, right? It's also when you're doing it with salespeople, and I think probably we had 12,000 or so people that were somehow sales, right? But when you're trying to talk about, hey, new programs, here's the new systems, here's what we're doing, a lot of people think of whether it's training programs or whatever it might be as kind of a soft HR thing. When you're doing it with salespeople, you can see pretty darn quick whether it's working or not.
Yeah.
And when you have good salespeople, they're looking for ways to continue to do their job better. So we were able to have a lot of success, but it's because we were starting with, hey, this is the sales team. Okay, you bought us, now we're going to go sell this. What new do I have to sell?
Yeah.
You can teach me how to go sell that? Okay, let's do it. So
what new tools are you giving me in a toolbox so that I can perform more efficiently?
Exactly. So
sell more.
Yeah. So it was interesting stuff, but I left NOV to go into the frac chemical business. Apparently, I joined that the day after it peaked.
Oh, okay. All right.
But at the end of 2012 at Rockwater and then Univar. But again, one of the fun reasons why I love this industry, though, spend first 8 years of my career learning all about drilling equipment and bits and BOPs and offshore drill ships, then move over to chemistry, chemicals, and being able to do it at a pretty high level.
It's a whole new learning curve.
It's a whole new learning curve. But again, great thing about this business, and I'm certainly not a chemist, but we had a lot of smart chemists and chemical engineers who were happy to take me under their wing and say, okay, hey, here's why this is good, and teach us. But as we got to around 2017, I hit call it a not mid-career crisis, just awakening of, am I doing the things I enjoy doing? Obviously, oilfield services around 2017 was still, since 15 it had been tough. So part of me said, with all these layoffs, probably people are going to need to start paying to refill some of these roles. And doing this kind of work really combines everything I've enjoyed doing. I enjoy selling.
So you just kind of stumbled upon, it's one of those things in 2017, you kind of see the industry, you kind of see what's going on with the industry, and you kind of took a look in the mirror and said, what can I do, or am I satisfied with what I'm currently doing?
Yeah, no, it was exactly that. And so the original Lowry Rhoads is actually Charlie Rhoads and Randy Lowry, my dad and his partner, who are both, both still working, but have kind of scaled back some. Randy's pretty busy though.
Right.
My dad certainly is closer and closer to retirement.
Right.
I actually worked for him when I was in college, doing similar stuff. So I always liked it, but so that helped me, because I was sitting there, I was thinking, what do I want to do? And really, what made it nice is my dad had picked up a new search, and he was planning to go on a 2-month vacation, a long cruise with my mom. He said, well, I can't be gone for 2 months, but I want this project. You've been thinking about doing some different things. You've thought about consulting. This really does combine everything you want to do. Why don't you come kind of take the lead on this project, see if it's still what you want to do, or if not, you can do anything else.
Right.
So it's just kind of funny how things are presented to you at the right time, and said, let's go do that. And it definitely sunk in. So that's what I've been doing since.
You jumped on that project, and the rest is history.
Yeah, absolutely.
So you've been doing this since not including the previous experience, but since 2017. So you've been doing about 3 years now.
January 17. So yeah, I guess we're wrapping up year 4.
Yeah, that's right. All right. So I want to dive into this right now.
Let's hit it, yeah.
Yeah, I do, because I think you have a lot of great things to discuss right now to people that are listening that are either in their current career path and either the number one, see the writing on the wall. There's so many different situations that people find themselves in, but either people on the career path, they find themselves in the wall, people that are struggling to say, hey, do I really want to do this?
Yeah.
Or people that are finding themselves kind of, either unemployed right now, either looking to get in the same thing, or maybe transitioning even out of the oil and gas industry, which is unfortunate, but I think that's definitely the sign of the times right now, and it's not a bad thing.
No, it's we're all human beings. We're responsible for taking care of our families, doing what's best for us, and looking at some financial planning thing. You can't say that the industry hasn't given people some reasons to have those thoughts. And on the record, I spent a lot of time working on getting people into this industry, and at the same time, certain things you've got to look at, or okay, am I doing what I want to do, and can I provide, however you define your success in that regard, for you and your family? It's been a tough few years.
It has been a tough few years, and I think if people are, it's not a bad thing getting into the oil and gas industry.
No.
It's great people here, and you're going to be friends after you get out, should you decide to make that move. But again, this is just a conversation for people out there that are in the oil and gas industry, that are out of the oil and gas industry, or people that might think about transitioning out of the oil and gas industry. So this first question, this first talking point that I want you to bring up, I kind of want you to break it off in two different things. First off, people that are in the oil and gas industry, and people that are thinking about transitioning out of the oil and gas industry. So you in your position, with so many people, so many good people out there right now that are reaching out to you or trying to call headhunters right now, how do people kind of differentiate themselves or stand out, or create impact when trying to land a new role in the oil and gas industry?
Yeah, no, that's great. And the big problem is they're not thinking about it that way. Now, maybe chalk some of it up to us being a engineering-oriented industry where
What do you mean they're not thinking about it that way? How to stand out?
Yeah, so I'll give you an example. I had somebody call me recently, president. So this is all levels. I could tell you the same story for an analyst, but this was a smaller kind of $80 to $100 million revenue business president, successful, but their project had kind of petered out, and called me and said, hey, I'm looking for the next deal. This is somebody I didn't know, just called me cold. So pretty much anytime if it's a cold conversation, I'm going to start it with the exact same question. So what's the situation or opportunity where you're the first person I need to call?
Okay.
So and just leave it open. And as is very common, can sat there quietly and then proceeded to give me his CV.
Okay.
So, and that's just what I see over and over when we get into looking at when people are applying. You can have the best experience in the world. And by the way, if you're listening to this in your energy industry, you're probably great at what you do because the people in this industry are, and you have great experience. You got to remember, there's tons of people with similar experience.
Yeah.
If I'm talking to you, you and I wouldn't be talking if you didn't have the bullets on the resume.
And that's a good point too. I mean, a lot of people. I mean, look, I think resumes are extremely important. I think. I mean, with everything going on right now, with the technology, this resume scanners and all that stuff. Look, having a good resume, having a strong resume is important.
It is important.
That being said, though, if I'm sitting there looking at all these resumes, everyone's resume can look tip top.
Yep.
It's the person behind. Don't use your. I would advise, and obviously you advise if I'm wrong, don't use your resume as a point of sale. Use that as kind of, no, this is my proof. This I can tell you what I'm doing, but this is why I can do it.
Yeah, it's the proof. I'm working on a FP&A, financial planning and analysis,
Right.
accounting manager role right now. And every single resume I look at is 4 to 6 years experience in a big 4 firm, 1, 2, or 3 years in an FP&A or accounting role in industry, or 6, 7 years progressive experience in FP&A accounting.
So it all kind of looks very
They
similar.
all look similar.
So how do you stand out?
Exactly. So how does one stand out? So what you need to think about is, and what people really need to remember is companies don't hire anybody. A human being hires somebody. And there's an old adage, which hopefully everybody has heard by now, but you get ahead by making your boss's job easier.
Yeah.
And then, by the way, they've got a boss that they're trying to get ahead by making their boss's job easier, and so on and so forth up the chain.
Right.
So what is that person looking for? You know, it's very, we think about this all the time in terms of if we go buy something. How many shirts in your closet do you have hanging there? A knit golf shirt that's got a little horse on it.
A bunch.
A bunch, right? I do too. Or a whale, or whatever the new ones are now. Okay, so those are $92, give or take, for something you could go get $15 for a knit golf shirt. Why do we pay the $92, right?
It's the logo. It's the brand.
The brand, but it represents something, right? There's
Yeah.
a story around that brand. Now, you could get into some of the specific factors. Oh, I like the way this one fits, or this one's got the better colors, or whatever.
Through the roof.
But it represents, it does something for us. We want to be seen in, okay, that's the stylish shirt. Maybe people know I can afford it. Whatever the driver. I just like, oh, my dad wore them. I like them. Okay, those are all stories around it. What you do is a story. We were chatting earlier about this, but back to the FP&A thing. What I'm waiting for is the person, when I say, hey, what do you do? I want them to look at me and say, your client's company's doing a lot of acquisitions. You know what I do? I get in and I get processes whipped into shape so good, solid, clean, consolidated numbers are coming back so the CFO doesn't have to spend time on anything other than strategic deals. Oh my goodness.
They just told you what they're going to bring to the table.
I'm waiting.
Value.
Yes, I'm waiting for somebody to say that. Now the reality is, when I'm calling people, all the questions I'm asking about what they do, tell me about your resume, I'm looking for that, because what people need to realize is this is all a game of justification. It's not only how do I stand out, how can I be remarkable, but then once you get through that hurdle, okay, now I have to just, in my case as the headhunter, when I present people to my client, I have to say, here's why.
Yeah.
And by the way, and in this case, what he told me, he or she, depending on the circumstance, is they need somebody to go to all these companies they're acquiring, get their financial situation whipped into shape so he can have good, clean numbers coming in. That's what the charge has been. So whether it's a third-party search or headhunter person like me, or even internal, if a recruiter is going to go to the hiring manager and say, here's why to look at this person, it's the what does this do for me? Again, it always comes down to what is this person going to do for me in my job?
Right. Yeah.
Yeah, so it's really think about what is your story, what is your value you bring to somebody, and then so in that case, if when I do talk to the person who says, gives me that, here's what I do is fantastic. Then what I'm going to do is, okay, great, you can get those acquired businesses financial processes in place. Have you ever done that before? Tell me about it.
Right.
And then that's when your resume comes into play and your experience, and then your resume is the proof, it's the justification. Here's I could do this. But it could also be something for those thinking, well, what if I want to do something different? Okay, still it's the same story.
Is that so? When you say
Yeah.
something different, is that a different job role or a different industry?
Could be job role or different industry, but honestly, this is the same process for even those of you still employed. If you're going to go ask for a raise, ask for a promotion, why? What are you doing for me?
I've been here for being. Loyalty isn't an excuse for promotion.
No, loyalty.
Value is.
Exactly, and loyalty really is about, loyalty is great, don't get me wrong, but we value what other you can do for me, and really, if you think about it in terms of the psychology of purchasing, the number one thing that drives people is being able to solve a problem.
Okay.
Then there's from hiring, okay, can this thing help, can whatever help me seize on an opportunity? So put it in terms of so now we're talking about trying to sell yourself, but still keep in mind when somebody's making a purchasing acquisition, we're more than anything motivated to solve a problem. What problem can I solve?
Yeah.
Now, if you can solve a problem and help seize an opportunity, then by goodness, that's fantastic. You've got a heck of a story, but that's not only how you are able to say, hey, here's what I can do, because also keep in mind, say you give me what I'm looking for. Well, now you've just flipped the switch, because if I'm talking to a lot of people, if you're competing for open oil and gas jobs right now, whoever's doing the evaluation is talking to a lot of people.
So you have to stand out.
You have to stand out. So Dr. Zach Hall is a professor at TCU who I do some work with, and he tells everybody, be remarkable. So even just like, how do you stand out? Not like be remarkable, like a pie in the sky comment, but literally, what about you is worth remark?
And let me stop you there. That's kind of one of the reasons that we're doing this podcast is like, you know, there's so many stories, there's so many individuals in the oil and gas industry, so many great people in our industry, and it's one of those things where it's like, you know, if we have the same job, your resume and your personality is completely different than mine.
Right.
And you might do your job completely different than the way I do it, even though it's both the same title, both this. So be the individual. Don't just be your resume. I mean, I think a way to visualize it, and correct me if I'm wrong, is it's kind of the iceberg thing. You know, you see 10% above the water. That's your resume.
Yes.
And everything underneath is what makes you remarkable. And
Right.
I said, well, I'm just a sales guy. I'm just a salesperson, sales girl. Like, I don't know what. That's not true. Everyone's got their story, and you got that role for a reason.
Yeah. If you say I'm just a sales guy or sales girl, guess what? You just made that a reality.
Yeah.
We speak stories into existence. Think about anything else. Think about BMWs that people pay $90,000 for. God didn't sit on high and declare BMW the ultimate driving machine.
Right.
They looked at their history, they looked at their processes, their spot in the market, and thought, you know, the luxury space, there's Mercedes, there's Lexus. I guess BMW is probably older than those, but for the sake of this conversation, what's our niche in there? You know what? We used to build airplanes,
Right.
fighter planes. That's in our DNA. We're the ultimate driving machine. So what gets people on the lot is the ultimate driving machine, but they created that story.
They created that experience, that brand.
Yes.
Yeah.
And then they can back it up. So when you go there, you can say, hey, I want the ultimate driving machine. I'm willing to pay $80,000 or whatever for it. But how do I know it's the ultimate driving machine? I mean, is this worth the money? Then they're going to bring out, you know, the sticker or whatever. Well, look, you know, here's the details. Here's the deal. Are you familiar with our manufacturing process? Let me tell you about our warranty. And so they go through all the things, but when you walked in, you knew you wanted it.
Yeah.
And so when they start providing the things that prove it, okay, you're like, okay, so you're already looking to be positive on those things anyway, but it's there. Your resume is the same thing. You create your story, a good story, bad story. Now here's the thing. It's not BS, the ultimate driving machine story, because they can back it up.
Right.
So you can create it, but if it's BS or not, it's dependent on if it's based in reality. Can you do it? And your story, probably your story is going to have, let's say 80% is core, but then you can tweak it for various different situations. I'm in a small consultancy now, I love it. But maybe at some point, I don't know, I'm kind of used to wearing flip-flops every day now, but if I wanted to go back working for a company again,
Right.
I've got a really good story for big, large, publicly traded corporations. I've got a good story for smaller private equity-backed growth situations. And 80% of why I'd be good for either of those stories is kind of the core. But then you got to look at the situation, and then what's the, you know, that kind of 10 to 20% tweak of why because the story for, if I were to go back to like an NOV, a Halliburton, Chevron, something like that, is different than the small private equity-backed growth type thing. I know what my core is, right? My strengths, what I'm good at, how I do it, my approach. But then you look at, okay, but how does it, again, what problem do I solve for them? How does it apply? And when we talk about, hey, for applying for jobs, go research the company you're applying to, learn everything about it. It's not just for the sake of learning about it. It really doesn't do you any good to walk into an interview and know everything there is to know
Right.
about XYZ company, just know about it. That research is so you can find where the hook is for your story. Oh, hey, I saw y'all are struggling with this. Let me tell you about how I'm an expert at helping make that problem go away. Or, oh, you're trying to break into this market? I actually have 5 years experience there and fantastic Rolodex in that area. How will that be able to help you? That's what the research is for, is to figure out how, take your core, your story, how do I put that added, that added level of sizzle on the steak
Right.
to go stand out in those interviews.
So people that are, let's talk about this tweaking of your story. Let's say you're an engineer,
Mhm.
right? And with all these consolidations going on, there's going to be a lot of great people out there on the
Yep.
street, unfortunately.
Mm-hmm.
But unfortunately, it's a sign of the times. So let's say I'm an engineer or whatever type of role at a E&P company or even a sales or even a service company,
Mhm.
oilfield service company. I know my core strengths. I know what
Right.
I've been doing the past 10, 15, 20 years, 25, 30. I know what I've been doing.
Right.
How do you tweak that? Let's say I'm tired of chasing rigs. Let's say I'm tired of the voluntary or just there's no jobs. How do you tweak that 20% if you're actually looking to go outside the oil and gas industry?
Well, that's a great question. So,
That was your question I'm repeating.
I know, so it must be great. Well, but it's really the same concept. So again, think about, so from the engineering standpoint, and so one thing that, by the way, a good interview is probably not going to hit you with, people are hitting themselves with, well, I don't have any experience working on engineering wind farm turbines,
Mhm.
for example. Okay, well, let's say, what experience do you have? Well, I've got 25 experience working on pressure control systems. Awesome, great. You've got a core technical strength that allowed you to be good at. Were you born working on pressure control systems?
Right.
No? Oh, so there was a time where you had never worked on a pressure control system and
And you had to learn it.
and you had to learn it. How did you learn it? There's a story there, right? What did that allow you to do? Okay. Did y'all do any, in 25 years, surely you had product updates or new technology with that? Yeah. Well, how did you become so good at that? And then there's stories there. Okay, how's that any different than coming in and learning windmill turbines? It's not. It's just another new thing. What people are looking for when we're evaluating talent, very rarely does somebody just stack up of every bullet, oh, they've got this experience, this experience, this experience. It's how are you going to do it? What's
Right.
your approach? How do you think? How do you tackle this? In fact, oftentimes if companies are trying to do something different, very common for me, they're looking for the out of left field type of candidate. We want somebody who's not so steeped in this is how things are done, but brings the outside viewpoint. Obviously have to have the technical backing. And by the way, if you're an engineer working on, again, the hardware part of pressure control systems or something, you can probably do the engineering for just about anything else.
Right.
There's nothing more. If you were doing
Engineer's
it,
numbers.
yeah, it's in engineering's numbers. If you could work on a subsea BOP stack, you can do anything.
So it's the thing is though, we're talking to you. It's not a question of competency or like I know you've never worked on a wind turbine or never worked on this and all that. You got the competency. You're a smart person. You're here right now in their office. What previous, whether it's work ethic or problem solving skills or value, did you do at your previous role in the last 25 years,
Right.
15 years, 10 years that you can bring to the table here?
Yeah, exactly. What's the problem you solve, and how do you do it a little differently to stand out? But even say it's not something different. Say you want to do the same darn thing.
Right.
Just again, smaller number of jobs, more people. Well, what is different about you? You're not just there because you're an engineer. And truthfully speaking, and I say this with love to all my engineers out there, but I've spent plenty of time coaching and training engineers transitioning into sales and leadership. There's a reason you're a good engineer. Your brain reverts to engineering
Right.
all the time. There's more to you than the engineer. So if it doesn't come to mind what your story is, just to create it, like I've been a sales guy my whole life. My strength is I can create stories, so
Right.
this is easier for me. But go back and think about, ask people you worked with, was there a common kind of question people came to you with?
Okay.
So that was a value people saw in you that you may not have realized. Were there certain circumstances where you always seem to get the call? What are those little things that stand out? I mean, and it could be any different thing. So let's say engineering manager, XYZ company. And let's say you're the kind of 60-year-old candidate who you've got a little gas in your tank left. You need to work another 5 more years, but how am I going to compete with these younger engineers? Well, think about other things about running engineering. Did a lot of the young people come ask you for advice? Did you enjoy that? Okay, well there's your story. Okay, yeah, you're an engineer, but you're not an engineer. You're a builder of engineering talent.
Yeah.
And by the way, if I'm sitting here looking at, and I'm an oil field or oil company, thinking about in a couple years, fingers crossed, when this thing turns up, I'm going to have to go rebuild all my talent. By goodness, I'm thinking about how am I going to build engineers. So there's the problem you solve for me. Yeah, okay, I need a mechanical engineer. You can do that, but you're a builder of engineers.
But it's up to you to tell that story.
Exactly. No one's just going to come up with that on their own. And even if you've got all the bullets in there that get that across, you can't trust that people are going to paint that, draw that conclusion. Your job is to paint the picture. And for those of you out there looking for jobs, or again, you have a job but you're just thinking about things, obviously do the networking, see what's out there. But the biggest impact of time spent on this, the biggest, say, action, which makes a result happen versus activity, is thinking about what's your impact story.
So it's not a question of just getting your name out there, telling people that you're looking for work or is LinkedIn open to work.
Mm-hmm.
It's more of a question of a lot of self-reflection and understanding what am I bringing to besides someone that's open for work? Because there's a lot of people available to work.
Exactly, and even to the point of getting your name out there, what are they talking about? So if a lot of people know that Susan Smith is, a really brilliant engineer or controller or salesperson, she's looking for work, okay, that's good. And if you like Susan and you think she's good and people trust your reputation, there's something to that, don't get me wrong. But wouldn't it be better for Susan if everyone knows what her impact story is and that's what she's putting out there? I don't want people, when they talk about, if they know me, Jonathan Rhoads, going out like, hey, did you know he's got his background's a mix of being a head of commercial organizations and leadership development. I mean, like I said, it's okay if people know that. That doesn't do anything for anybody. What I want people talking about when they talk about Jonathan Rhoads and my name goes around is, hey, if you've got a change situation, you're trying to do something different, especially in oilfield services, he's probably the best person you can call to go find the right person or build talent.
Right.
That's what I want the networking to be. You always need to be networking, no question.
So how do people network during these times with you? I mean, what are you seeing as being successful right now? Because I would assume in your situation, probably your calls have gone through the roof lately. Probably you're talking to a lot more people. How are you seeing, I guess, how are you seeing a successful networking story?
It's very individual now. That what we all like. I mean, whether we're looking for jobs or you and me trying to develop business. Where it was great was when you could go to the SPE or IADC lunch or a happy hour, the industry events. That was our bread and butter, and that's also actually how we built the culture of the industry. But we don't have that now because of COVID, and hopefully soon this will be behind us and we can go back to that. But it's really been individual one-on-one. But to that point, that's why this is all the more important. I would say between mid-April and through early June, I could have filled every 30-minute block of my day between 7 a.m. and 8 p.m. With a new person calling for transition advice, whether they've been laid off or they just are thinking, oh man, this is a mess. So that's a lot of people. I've probably talked to 400 people in this span. So that's a lot of people. They don't all stand out to me.
Right.
Most don't stand out. Now, I try to give some advice where I could, things like that, and hopefully that was helpful. But again, the challenge of it being one-on-one is you've got to do something to stand out, because I don't have extensive notes on all 400 people I talked to. When I pulled out the notepad, when somebody had something that was remarkable, or had a good story, or was in mind. So the negative of it being one-on-one is you've got to do that much more to stand out if somebody's talking to a lot of different people. But the positive is, since we've all just kind of accepted it's one-on-one now, I find it's really easy to get people on the phone or on a Zoom now. It's been great. I've been going back to people I've kind of lost touch with, say, hey, we've got the time to chat now. I know your Zoom works. Let me calling you. We hadn't talked to each other since
the
cook-off.
The cook-off? Or the gym, yeah, something like that.
Hopefully they're around the same time, because cook-off leads to needing more gym time.
Amen. No, so that's the thing though. People
but you can get people on the phone now, so you've got the opportunity to deliver that high-impact message.
But also people that are sitting there listening right now and be like, oh, well, how do I stand out? I got nothing to stand out. I've been, I'm not speaking on the sales side, because I'm just, or an engineer. I'm just an engineer. I'm just in sales. Your whole career is all about standing out. Your whole career is to drill a better well with less incidents, no accidents. Your job as a salesperson is to break into new companies that you don't know anyone there and establish relationships. Like, you've been trying to stand out your entire career. All it is right now is just kind of shifting. It's a new way or a new action on how to stand out.
Right, and there's the remarkable thing that stands out. Obviously, most of them you want to be applicable to what problem do you solve from a business standpoint. But you've lived a life. There's other things that can help you stand out that aren't necessarily business related that you can work into the conversation. I helped lead a month-long boot camp at TCU this summer with a bunch of about to graduate undergrads and a few that were recent grads. And we were talking about value propositions and standing out. And one of the students had gone to Japan for a couple years to be an actor in Japan.
Really?
And then, didn't work. The things thought was going to happen didn't work out. Came back, so finishing up his degree and he's going into business and sales. But there's an interesting story there. So that always started out. And especially think about if you're, if there's group interviewing or something like that, you're always looking for reasons to stand out. So there's some. So you went to Japan for a couple years to be an actor. Tell me about that. And that's the kind of thing that's worth diverting. Even if you only have a 30-minute interview, you'll probably get like a minute around that. Okay, so there's something that stands out.
Yeah, you're able to get out of your comfort zone, go to a different country. If I'm looking at an international position to fill, I'm thinking this guy or girl is ready to take a chance.
Exactly. So it's twofold. One, if there's something, hey, we're looking at somebody that we can put into different cultures, that person could probably do it. Or even just, this has nothing to do with international, but we remember the Japan story. Okay, there's that person. I mean, back, say at NOV when we used to have our next generation program for bringing people in from undergrad, when you get into the interview days, you might be talking to 30, 40 kids in one day, and then you're in the war room afterwards fighting over, okay, of these 100 people we brought to the headquarters for the final round, we've got 25 spots, who are we going to get them? When you're sitting around with everybody, it's how do you remember the person? It's the girl who was was she a cheerleader and a chemical engineer? Okay, so that's a reason to stand out. You got to have reasons to stand out in people's mind, and you have things. Especially if you've been in the oil field, you got a story.
Yeah.
You got a story or two. So, whether it's something that happened in Midland or some kind of travel thing you had to, whatever it is, maybe you invented something. Maybe you're part of a team that did something. There's something about you that stands out. And if you struggle to think about what is my big high-level impact from a business standpoint, one, keep thinking about it, because that's what you need to set yourself up and get the job. There's something about you that's at least worth remark. You are different than everybody else in some way. Get that out there so people can remember.
But that's such a good point right now, because whether you've been doing the same job for whether it's 5 months or 15 years, you were talking about how do you stand out? How do you kind of put yourself out there? People are always talking about lately it's like personal branding. That's become such a hot topic. People on LinkedIn, people on whatever it is, trying to promote their personal brand, and I think it's people view branding. It's like, oh God, influencer, blah blah blah. But no, you have a certain I guess professional business side of things where it's not a holding a glass of champagne and Cabo, taking your picture like this is my brand. No,
right.
It's showing your value and showing how your personality is different, how it stands out.
No, absolutely.
So how do people stand out to a headhunter or recruiter today?
It obviously, there's the things about you that you hopefully are confident stand out, and then if you can do any previous research to find the thing that stands out, that might be relevant to that person. Especially now with social media, LinkedIn, whatever, Google, you can find out something about the person you're talking to going in. So I had somebody, it is not hard to find for me. I'm a hardcore TCU Horned Frog.
All right.
So every once in a while, I'll have, because I tend to schedule phone calls beforehand, so there's a little bit of prep coming, or you've at least probably gotten an email from me if I've gone out and just tried to track you down. So some of the people who get it will check and say, hey, I see you love TCU, and we'll talk college football for a couple minutes before we get into
they're establishing that bond, though, that common ground.
They're establishing a bond, common ground. It's, okay, so there's at least some likability there. I'm enjoying the conversation with the person. So now as when we switch into my going through their background and things like that, I like them more. And this is doesn't take a PhD to get across it. We hire people we like.
Yeah.
We want to deal with people we like.
You want to work with people you like.
Exactly. So now that doesn't,
So it's okay to be a creeper. It's okay to say, hey, look, I look at your profile and I see that you were at company X for about 5 years. Did you ever know Sarah Smith over there?
Exactly. You can be a creeper for certain things because that's not creepy, and especially if somebody really loves something, they're not even going to think about it. Now, you might not want to roll in with, you've got beautiful children. But
in 2006, he was at the Dixie Chicken.
Yeah.
How was it?
Yeah, exactly. But especially in the oil business, the people is what makes the industry, right? I mean,
Absolutely.
this is it. So if you say, oh, hey, I saw you were at, Rockwater. Were you in sales with, Matt
Yeah.
Smith? Yeah. So we interacted. Cool. I mean, so there's a connection. So we've connected, and again, you're doing something to stand out. And honestly, I came to all these things from being the head of sales training for a company and getting my own training and all that. And then I finally realized every single one of these concepts applies to selling yourself for a job, because guess what? It's the same thing. And if you're out there and you struggle with coming up with these things, you have a friend who's in sales, sit down with them, buy them a beer, coffee, tea, whatever, or do it virtually. Let's being responsible now. But,
Yeah, sure.
but ask them, hey, you're in sales, how would you pitch me? And by the way, guess what happens when you have those conversations with people? One, you're going to get some good advice that's going to help you with that. But also, you're now creating champions for you and ambassadors out there. So you spend a few minutes talking with somebody about what that story is. Well, now, one, they know your story. They feel invested in your success since you did them the honor of asking for help. And by the way, it doesn't bother. If somebody asks you for help with something like this, that's on our. This is important. This is your job. This is your career. You're taking care of your family. You care enough about my opinion. Wow, that's a gift. So that they're going to give you attention.
You're honored for that.
Absolutely.
Like, you're bringing me into this, and you want to ask me this question. Like, you're very honored, but you have to be able to listen, because sometimes you have to ask for the good and the bad. I feel
Yes.
like.
Oh, yeah. That's very important. So there's nothing worse in under circumstance than an uncoachable person. So again, if you honor that, if that person gives you the gift of their time, because you honor them with the gift of asking, and then you go in and you're combative or don't want to listen to what they have to say. Yeah, then you're better off not talking to anybody, because now that person's like, well, actually, you know what? Not much value proposition here. I don't know if people want to work with.
They came for me asking for something, and they blew up at me when they had the answer.
Exactly. Or I've even had where I go back and if you get to at least final status with me, you're going to get the feedback on yes, no, why they didn't like you or whatever. And I'll tell you, I know it's frustrating for those of you who are applying for jobs and you don't hear anything back. Sometimes it's just a numbers game.
Yeah.
I run a small business. I just can't get back to everybody who applies. But if you and I have spoken, you're going to get some feedback. And there's a number of reasons that I do that, but part of it's just experience and when I've been on the other side of it. But I've had people not get the role. And sometimes it's passionate, you get excited about it, and then come back and I say, well, here's why they went with the other person. And, usually it's not because sometimes it's because you lacked a skill set or experience, but usually it's just, this person fit, and then you justify the experiences and skill sets to be like, well, we feel like this is the right person. Not often there's somebody not long ago that was just got argumentative. Well, that's not accurate at all. This is the most important thing they need. It's like,
I'm sure they're frustrated.
and I'm sure they're frustrated, and you try to take that for what it is and neutral it out. But I've actually just learned something about that person. Because, by the way, I usually have multiple projects. And so what I've just learned is they don't take bad news well. And, I get paid to go find the right person for my clients. I don't think I'm going to be recommending that person to somebody else now because, and again, it's not because they got upset because they didn't get a job. That happens. We all understand that.
You took the ego side out and the whole brew side out. You just kind of identified a trait. You're like, okay, criticism doesn't handle well.
Yep.
Telling the boss what they need to do.
Yeah, exactly. It's coachability. Hey, when you go to the next one, here's what you could have played up or something like that. So instead of the person saying, okay, that's good, helpful, use that going forward, they've now basically taken themselves off my list at least. Because again, I've just learned, and you only get, when you're interviewing somebody, you only have so many, that's why all hires don't work. I mean, you've got an hour here, maybe 30 minutes there, an hour here, an hour with that person. In the end, you don't have that much time to establish, is this person going to fit with us? So if you just give me that instance of, well, you got delivered some bad news and you didn't take it well, there's another data point, and that's a negative one.
Yeah.
So if you're running a division now and you get some bad news or somebody brings you something you might not want to hear, are you going to go off on them the same way? So we've always got to think, again, like we're talking about, it is a matter of we're building our brand. Now that doesn't mean you have to be out in social media like crazy.
Right.
Proactively building a brand, but you should always know what your brand is because guess what? No matter what, you're selling yourself for your entire career. Either for new job, promotion, raise, what opportunity you might want. So you at least have to have be managing your brand enough to do that. Lots of moments impact that brand, whether you're thinking about them or not.
And you talked about that kind of, I think before we got on the podcast, you're like, hey, look, if you're going to talk to your boss about getting a raise, you can't go, well, I've been here 10 years, I deserve one. You have to talk about the value you're going to bring. You have to I'm really enjoying this conversation because a lot of people, I feel like, would come on and they tell a very, very, very necessary side of this. It's network, get your resume out there, polish it up, call the right people, do this, do that. But I like your message. It's more of a personal, internal look at, I guess, what you provide to a team, what you provide to your group. And I think that actually might help a lot of people kind of clarify maybe their career path.
Yeah, it could. I mean, and then when you think about, well, maybe I should try something different. Like in my case, I did pretty well in big organizations. Yeah. So it was a jump to go into, 3 partners, small business mode, being a boutique consultancy. But when I looked at my story, my strengths, if I were going to go sell myself for a VP of sales or a VP of HR job, and why I thought that would be good, the same story goes for consulting. Right, I'm doing what I'm doing now because I'm blending the same skill sets, and then, okay, so some other things on the edges are, I'm an entrepreneur, I'd like to try to see if I can do my own thing, all those kinds of things. So when you're weighing an opportunity or think, should I try something different, that might be industry, situation, anything, think through what your story is. What is your value? And a good way to just kind of go through, is this the right thing for me, is if you can't come up with a compelling value proposition, impact story for that opportunity, then maybe it's the case where that's not the right opportunity for you. Now, it also could be you just haven't thought through it enough to figure that out.
I think that's that's a crucial point you have to do. You have to sit there and think about it. Like just as you said, I think it's a great idea. Ask people, hey, look, this is kind of what I bring to the table, what I feel like I bring to the table. Is this something you agree on? I mean, is there strengths that I'm not mentioning or weaknesses that I need to focus on? I need to maybe sharpen or strengthen.
No, absolutely. And also keep in mind, if you're able to do that, even if you can rule yourself out, like say, no, you know what, I'm not a fit for this, here's why, but here's where I am a fit. So I got approached for a HR VP job, sat there, listened to it, like I was telling you before, but kind of realized I tried, because the organization was interesting, but like I just can't really come up with the value pitch, because they were looking for somebody strong in comp and benefits and those kinds of things, which I get, but I'm not an expert on it. I can't lead in it. They needed someone to lead on that. But then I was able to say, well, I'll tell you what, if you get to where what you're really focused on is human capital and driving the organization through building talent, strong leadership development, those kinds of things, then let's have a talk.
Right.
So think about if you're talking to a recruiter who's got tons of different jobs they're looking at. Okay, you're able to pull yourself out of one and do them the favor of pulling yourself out of one when you know you're not right, but you're leaving it on a positive. You say, I'm not good for this, but if it was this. So now you've given them to earlier when we started talking, what's the scenario or situation where you're the person I call?
Yeah, you're solving the problem. I remember when I was, whenever I'm in sales and someone calls me and they ask, like, hey, do you know anyone that does X, Y, Z? Or like, do you do X, Y, Z? And I'll say no. But I'll always say, I'll tell you what though, let me try to find out someone that does do that.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Because what, they're handing with me and call 14 other people? Might as well make their job a little bit easier, and that's what they rely on you.
Absolutely.
So the golden question is this right now. So we have, should you transfer outside the oil and gas industry right now?
Yeah.
If you find yourself in this circumstance.
Right, and it's I would tell anybody do the same, that your number one most important thing in your career, hopefully, is taking care of your family.
Right.
And whatever your metric for success is. So the reality is it's been a tough go the last few years, and we talk about creating your value story at some point. I think especially on the oilfield services side here, the industry itself is going to have to do a look in the mirror and figure out, okay, what's our value proposition to the talent as well. But so the answer is, it depends. What do you want to do? What are the opportunities? It's tough right now. On OFS, it has been for 5 years. It's probably going to be for another year or two.
And operators right now are getting slammed.
And operators, so it's finally hitting the operators now as well. I mean, it's hitting them now the way it had hit oilfield services. Right. So I will say this, if you love this industry, by the way, I love this industry, but even me with my business, it's been oilfield services, chemicals, and nonprofits. I'm certainly trying to find other non-energy client bases as well for my own side. I think it's pragmatic. If you love this industry and want to stay in it, fantastic, you should, you can, and by the way, the world still runs on our products.
Yeah.
It's made out of our products, no matter what
Happens November.
November.
It's going to be here.
Yeah, it's going to be your oil and gas. Your kids coming out of school, or if you are somebody coming out of school, you can spend your entire career in this industry, and it's awesome. Love it. So, but again, in the near term, you just need to be aware that you might have to get creative in what you're doing, or also, we'll talk in a second about if you want to look at something else. But if you do want to stay in this industry, and you think, I love this industry, but clearly just there's not a lot of hiring right now, there is no shame in getting off the career trajectory to taking a job that just pays the bills.
Right.
And whatever it is, that level. I was talking to somebody recently who was smart, bright, product management type. He's working at HEB, stocking, not far from his house. He had enough saved up. He's like, I need a little more money. I'm not too proud. HEB is a good company. I don't mind it. I'm going to go do it. Good for him. 2 years from now, or hopefully not even that long, shoot, even if it's 6 months from now, when this person's sitting there, and now, does he need to put the HEB on his resume? Probably not. But maybe he does. But somebody's going to ask, what have you been doing? If he says, well, I've been working at HEB, that's not going to be a negative.
No.
The kind of company you want to work for is, well, you worked at HEB. Well, yes, there weren't a lot of jobs. It was COVID. I'm built to work, and I'm not ashamed to say I needed to bring some money in for my family. There was a job at HEB. I went to go take it. That person's getting hired all day. Now maybe it's not the HEB example, even if it is.
But it shows something about the personality, about the character. It's look, I just want to work.
Exactly.
It shows drive.
It shows drive. Or even if it's still a professional job, just something totally different, but we're able to get it. Okay, I think there's going to be a term of, that was their COVID job.
Yeah.
That kind of is a differentiator from it's not like, you're job hopping or whatever. It's, okay, you kind of get a break this year of, okay, that's the job you had to take, you want to swing back in, everyone understands you needed to work. Now, with that being said, if you've been laid off or things are slow and you've taken this opportunity to say, you know what, I've been blown, as we all do, you start your career and you blow and go until you retire.
Right.
So if you're, say, a fortunate position where you've saved enough or wherever it is where, now's your chance, you can slow down and spend more time with the kids and the family, and you want to spend a year doing that, fantastic as well. But guess what? What are we talking about? We're talking about a story. So I'm not saying, hey, you're setting yourself back by not finding something to do because you want to spend time with your family. I'm not saying that at all. But that's your story, and it's very direct. Well, I was keeping my ear to the ground, but I realized, I've been working hard for 15 years, 20 years. My kids were home. I got to homeschool them. Actually liked it. I got to spend time with them, and now that we're getting back to work, I'm recharged and ready to go. Again, that's a story somebody can tell.
You took a negative situation, not negative because it's a very good point, being closer to your family and your children also, but you took a situation where some people might kind of come to the table and like, yeah, I just kind of stayed at home and kind of be reserved about it, and spun it to be a positive thing because you are looking at the bright side.
Exactly. But then to go back to now talking about actually, should you go look at another industry? Yeah. Would you enjoy the work? And there's a lot of cool things out there to get to do. I mean, where my work, say, is interesting, doing so much energy and nonprofit. So, I mean, there's an example. Maybe there's something something you're passionate about, and you've got good skill sets. And say you've been in sales. Well, okay. Fundraising is sales.
Yeah.
You're selling ideas. So maybe if I've always, I've always thought Texas Children's Hospital was a fantastic organization. Well, you know what? I think they might be hiring fundraisers right now. Maybe you could go do that. Now, are you going to make oil field money, like at the peak? Probably not, especially if you go to nonprofit, which, by the way, nonprofit is not taking a vow of poverty either, but it's just a different thing. But man, if you really enjoy, say, again, I'm using Texas Children's Hospital as an example here, you get to go in and tell everybody why they're great and sell fundraising for them instead of selling shakers. Well, you might find a whole new thing in your life that's fantastic.
It's going to be more impactful to you because you're affecting different lives. And also another thing too, for the networking side, you never know who you're going to meet.
Exactly. My first job between college and NOV was at Big Brothers Big Sisters.
Yeah.
And the president of the CEO of it at the time said, hey, I know you don't want to do this, but I graduated college December of 03. 04 was not a real strong hiring year, oil and gas either. And she said, look, Katie Ford, CEO, said, we're doing some reorg stuff. I know you did that when you're doing the consulting stuff you did. I think you got the right mindset, but also we need fundraising. I know you can sell, so just spend a year with me on this. You're going to network like crazy.
Oh yeah.
And you'll have my support. Help me get some of these things we're trying to get done, and then you've got my full support to go off into the world of oil and gas.
I mean, that was one of the biggest oil and gas, the Big Brother, Big Sister up in Kingwood, I think, right? Metcalf?
Oh, the golf tournament?
Yeah,
Yeah,
the golf tournament.
so for example, because this was 2004,
Yeah.
so it was the first year, so part of my job was coordinating that golf course, that golf tournament, because I was the director of fundraising. So we had that event, so there I am, and I'm really just a year out of school, but then it's
everybody.
Metcalf and all this, I mean, Quail Oil Tools, all these different groups,
yeah.
and I'm putting on a golf tournament I'm managing the golf tournament, and we did it, now fortunately, we had good organization, they did a good job, but it came off well, it made me look well, and I met the 10 people on the committee for that, but then also everybody out of the deal, but I'll tell you, that was 2004, I ran into Jim Metcalf at somebody's high school graduation party 2 years ago at B&B Butchers. So in 2018, I worked on that in 2004, and he looked at me, I looked at him, like, Jim. Yeah, it's like Jonathan Rhoads. I was back at BBBS back then. I was like, oh my goodness. I mean, so
you never know where first off, you're going to see these people again, or where it can potentially take you.
yeah, exactly. And again, it's not necessarily going to nonprofit because you feel some mission, but and say you're in Houston, you want to stay here. There's a lot of stuff going on here. I mean, medical's huge, or even chemicals, alternatives. There's a whole lot of different things out there, and I mean, I guess I was technically within industry, but when I left NOV, which was all equipment, to go to Rockwater, which was all chemicals and water treatment, I thought, I mean, can't even spell chemistry. How am I going to do this? But it was so much fun getting to learn completely new, different things. I mean, when I was sitting there, somebody was helping me understand how a certain product we had works, and it finally clicked in my mind, oh, this is how my laundry detergent works. So obviously that's not like some life-changing revelation, but I do my own laundry, and I found it very interesting that day that, oh, okay, so this is why this works.
You understand the process.
So the fun part of it, if you do change industry, is you get to learn something new. There's a whole different world out there beyond our oil and gas spectrum. Now obviously our industry is the biggest in the world, so we see a lot, but there's a lot of other cool things going on. And guess what? Say you go do something else, and you spend 1 year, 10 years, 20 years, and you decide, oh, there's something else I'd like to do in oil and gas. Guess what? Come on back.
Right.
But for those of you who are thinking about going outside of industry, one thing, again, getting your story straight, is the biggest thing that people trying to transition from oil and gas to another industry experience is people's skittishness at hiring people from oil and gas because they've all been burned in the past. Because, okay, I take you now, but when things boom back up, and because that is the challenge, oil and gas is very good salaries, generally speaking. And in a lot of cases, especially if you're...
Good salaries before March, go on.
But before March, yes. Any salary is better than your no salary right now, but, not uncommon for especially, say, offshore, things like that. Getting upwards around $200K a year with a manager title. Most other industries, you're a VP before you're even sniffing that. So, so there's kind of a level set of, this is going to look different that you've got to go through. But again, pay is better than none.
Right.
But then also just, you need to prepare yourself for your story, and I hope it's genuine and legitimate. But when you go and they'll say, well, how do I know you're not just going to run back to oil and gas when it kicks back up? Well, have a good story for them and for yourself of if you're really interested in this opportunity, why you're not just going to go run back to oil and gas, because that's going to be the biggest hurdle, even more so than, oh, well, you've been in oil and gas, you've never engineered a tennis shoe or a solar panel or whatever it might be. I would say 9 times out of 10, they're going to be far more concerned about you running back to oil and gas than they will be whether or not you can transition into that.
Because you're in the office for a reason. You're sitting there talking to them for a reason, because you have the competency, obviously. You got the skill set, you got the knowledge. Now the question is your story.
Yep. And by the way, your story, it can go both ways. Obviously, you're in there because you have the skill sets, whatever, there's something they called you, but you got a good story, you can get a job created for you that didn't even exist.
Well, yeah, that's a good point, but let's also talk about the personal story right now. I mean, people that do have their jobs that are might be out there and kind of nervous about the state of the industry, what's going to be happening, and all that stuff. How can do you advise people to kind of start thinking about the stories, whether they're in a transition period or not?
You should always know your story, and this is just as a human being.
So how can it help people in their current role?
Yeah, in your current role, one, do you know what you're good at? I mean, there's a reason you're there, and I do have to say, I think we're getting better. Historically, the industry, your performance review was something you had to do. There's not a lot of good coaching, and when you do have a performance review, it's generally around the here's where you need to improve. You know, I'm born and raised in Houston, so I go back to like the '94 Rockets. When Rudy Tomjanovich was in practice working with Akeem Olajuwon, he didn't look at Akeem and say, you know, your pull-up three-point shooter needs a lot of work. Let's take these last 20 minutes of practice for you to get better at pull-up three-point shooting. He looked at Akeem and said, okay, dream shake moves in the post, spend 20 more minutes working on that, because if he just got marginally better and was able to score 4 to 6 more points a game in the post, again, this is something he's already the best in the history of the game at. He practices more on that, because again, marginally better there, 4 to 6 more points a game, those are more games won. In your job, certainly there's areas where we need to get better, and there could be critical things you need to get better. You have your job because you're really good at something.
Right.
But by and large, you rarely talk to anybody, especially in this industry, who's had a manager or somebody else sit down and say, you know what you're freaking great at? This. We don't get that kind of feedback, and so then we don't know. You have your job because you're great, and if you're really good at something, then you just tweak that, and you're going to have a much bigger impact. And that goes into your story, what you're good at. So you always be thinking about what your story is. Always know the value you bring to your boss, to your company, to the organization, and it can evolve and moderate. But if you're always thinking about it, then when you do have to think about it, either going in for that promotion, going to ask for a raise, or whatever, or career transition, then you don't even have to think about it, you just know.
Are you seeing a lot more people kind of talking about in the industry, or what kind of trends are you seeing right now on your side of the table?
From 2018 through 19, where there was still a good amount of layoff activity, I had far more people who had not been laid off calling me. And really, it's what I call the succession candidate role. So, probably mid-30s to early 40s, somebody who's maybe a business unit president, a controller, VP of this, general manager of a small company, that I guarantee are on some, and this is especially big in oilfield services, more so than operators, but I think operators is probably starting to catch up to that, of, hey man, I don't know if the next 20 years of this makes sense. Now that we've hit 2020, there's still that, but just the layoff numbers have come to where it is. But it's one of the things where, so that's the big trend. So, and where I mentioned earlier, the industry needs to be thinking about what's the value. So, especially at these higher level roles, for example, the model has always been, hey, base salary, probably pretty good, and bonus and stock options. Well, especially if you've been in OFS, stock options haven't meant anything since 2014. So it'd be like, and where, if there's a golden handcuff or maybe, lower level, even at least a bronze or copper handcuff, there's not even a piece of string now. So what we need to be thinking about is, because everyone who has these concerns is valid for the reasons we've talked about. And you're not a good person or a bad person or right or wrong for thinking about those. If you're doing the right thing, if you're thinking about, how can I, over the course of my career, make sure I can take care of my family?
Right.
And be rewarded for the work I do, and we do hard, good work, right? So the industry needs to start thinking about, okay, what do we need to change? Because, again, the value proposition thing goes both ways. So how do we keep people in this industry in spite of these challenges? How do we this time not do the same thing we've done over and over? How do we develop people? I mean, again, it's probably been a good 5 years since many companies have done any real training development programs. Because and I'm not criticizing any individual company, because, and I can tell you, I've spoken to a lot of potential clients on the, say, leadership development, whether it's putting together training programs or some coaching programs, who know they need to do it.
Right.
Want to do it, but we just don't have the money. And that's real. I mean, that is a real thing. So I'm not going to sit here and claim that I have this silver bullet in my pocket and all these things, but it's conversations we as an industry, companies, probably need to be bigger topics at the industry groups is, one, how do we what's the value proposition for working in this industry? And by the way, unless you were born in Louisiana, Texas, Oklahoma, or oilfield country, if you're under 32 or so, the PR ain't real great for oil and gas.
It's never been good.
So I mean, that's going to be that much harder to bring new people in. So, that's a big challenge. And again, I think the oil and gas industry has great stories. We're the most important industry in the world, for whatever reason you like. And I tell people involved in a lot of STEM programs, if you're interested in engineering or science, biggest problems in the world you can tackle here. I've been to, I think, 62 countries. So if you want that experience, you can get that here. You can have all the different experiences. So we've got the great things, but we've got to shore some things up. But in the end, same way, again, it's when somebody's looking for a job, it's, here's my value I bring to you as a hiring manager, to you as a company. we as an industry also need to be thinking about, hey, talent, what's my value proposition to you? And secure employment clearly is not the story now. So we've got to start to figure out about what that is. And by the way, just like anything else we talked about, where your resume, your experience will have fodder for your story, the industry's got good material to build a story around too. We've just got to figure out what that is.
Right, and it's more than just updating your LinkedIn post or your Facebook post on this comes from oil, because chances are your network is your oil and gas friends. Family.
Absolutely. And to that note on LinkedIn, because we hadn't hit it, one trend you asked about trends is a lot of people are posting more, and it's definitely good getting out there that you're looking for work. Obviously, as we've been talking about, get your story out there, but also always keep in mind, this is purchasing psychology going on, and people want what is in demand. So every once in a while I see some people kind of post stories of, and I'm trying not to be insensitive, but basically a poor me, like, oh, it's been really tough and struggling, those kinds of things. And by the way, if you are struggling with that, I mean, I get it. It's stressful.
Absolutely.
I hope to God you have a support system where you can vent that and have those kinds of things.
But that might not be.
Don't put it over the airwaves on LinkedIn, because we want what is in demand. And again, there's so many people looking for jobs, and it's not fair, right? Because it stinks that it works this way, where the person who has a job just kind of seems more desirable than the person who doesn't have a job. And by the way, plenty of people who don't have jobs are getting jobs, but it's just, again, it's the whole package of things. So again, always keep in mind what you're putting out there for your story, how it impacts your story, how it impacts your brand. And you're not working right now, many of you. You're still great at what you do. And as far as anyone else is concerned, there's a reason you haven't been. You haven't wanted to yet. You've been waiting for the right opportunity. So again, it's all in how you control your story. But stories have negative and positive things. So just be aware of what you're putting out there.
No, that's a good point. I mean, during my time in sales, you meet a lot of my, I call them frustomers, friends that are customers, and you hear stories about salespeople, writing them and saying, hey, look, if I don't, say this, frac tank, string of pipe, whatever it is, then my job's on the line. But a lot of times people don't want to be guilt in or feel bad for making a decision. Right. So I don't feel like that might be a strong thing to do, is doing the poor me stories.
No, and
it's not, and I'm not saying do the bullshit positivity. So
no.
Another day looking for
no. It's again, keep in mind what your story is, and again, think about when you make your own purchasing decisions, what you look for. People like confidence. People don't like desperation.
Yeah.
And desperation can be a stinky cologne. And by the way, you can be desperate. I have been desperate before. Most of us have at some point.
I'm literally desperate right now. Go
on. But you got to figure out how to channel that in going in, because I'll tell you, if somebody says to me, and it happens sometimes, man, I'm just really desperate. So I'm really desperate for anything. Okay, I feel for that person. And my client is paying me to weed out what they don't want.
Yeah.
And for as much as I want you, maybe even a stranger, to find something, I'm paid to care about my client.
Yeah.
And that's why I have clients, because I know I care about that. So you've always got to think, as individuals making decisions based on these psychological drivers of what we want. The good news of it is you are in complete control of it. You create your story. You control what you put out there. You control how you deliver the message. You can control what people are saying about you by, kind of like we've talked about, when you're doing the networking, getting your story out there. So you're in control of it. So that's the great news about all this whole story is you're in control of all of this.
Right.
So given that, be mindful of what you're putting out there, since you're in control of it.
That's an excellent point. You kind of have to do a little personal SWOT analysis on yourself and find out, kind of what your strengths are, what your weaknesses, where do you stand out versus others. Jonathan, I think this is. Do you have anything else that you'd like to bring up? Because I think this is very good stuff that we're talking about.
No, I would just say for people who are listening who truly maybe in that desperate mode, just know that it's going to work out. And if people talk about, maybe let's finish with this, luck. Everyone wants to luck into a job. Or you might look at somebody and say, man, he or she gets all these opportunities. They're so lucky. People create their own luck. There's things you can do that make it seem like you're lucky, but actually anything that happens is the result of actions you do. So, if you're not seeing And also on the same note, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over, expecting different result.
Right.
If you want to see a different result, start doing some different things. So, think about what is it you're saying to recruiters or when you're networking about yourself. Do you know what you're doing? And by the way, if you're getting depressed about these kinds of things, taking positive actions to rectifying it are going to make you feel better.
Right.
You spend an afternoon thinking about what is my value proposition? What's the impact I provide to this type of company? And then you come up with a good message. That's going to be a big jolt of positivity. That's going to help your mindset. And by the way, guess what that's going to do? That positivity is going to come through in your conversations with other people. So that's going to come back into people interacting with you better, which is then going to have you in a more positive state where you need to take the next positive step of, okay, maybe now you reach out and ask 5 new people to say, hey, I'd like your feedback on what value I think I can bring, or ask for courtesy interviews of, hey, I just want to get out there and practice some of these things.
Yeah.
All these things go together. It's to keep a positive mindset, and also I believe things happen for a reason. They go the way they're supposed to go. So if opportunity you're interviewing now for doesn't work out, and you've done all the right things, so, hey, I had a great pitch, I was networking, all those things, you didn't get the job because there's something wrong with you. Especially if you got into multiple phone calls or anything like that, there was nothing wrong with you. You're great. Somebody else happened to fit for whatever reason it is, what that group was looking for at a different time, and that same thing is out there waiting for you.
It's the question of confidence. I mean, you're talking to people about, being positive and just kind of spin it back and all that stuff. So at the end of the day, when you are sitting in that interview and you've had the self-reflection, you've thought about, what value you bring, you've thought about, your story.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not sitting there and saying, please hire me. I'm saying this is why you want to hire me.
Right. I mean, I tell the story every once in a while, but years ago we're doing the search for the CEO of Catholic Charities in Orlando. And kind of typical people there, and of course with those projects you have either a bishop or a cardinal on the board, so it's big stuff. And they said, well, what we want is somebody who's got X amount of experience running a Catholic Charities in another city and going through all this. The person who ended up getting the job, Captain Arnie Nelson, who'd been one of the highest ranking Navy officers in Europe. Now, what experience, you asked, did he have running Catholic Charities organizations? Absolutely zero. What experience did he have doing any kind of nonprofit work other than governmental Navy? Zero. You know what he did? He picked up the phone, saw the opportunity was there, said, you know what? I'm either going to be admiral and I have to stay here, or if I make a move, but he's like, I'm a leader, and he was confident in that. And what that organization needed, they didn't need somebody who was an expert running Catholic Charities organizations. They were maybe a $3 million organization that was in Orlando and didn't even have a relationship with Disney. They needed somebody who could come in, build. I mean, this guy had led landings in Europe and had all these officers following him and all this. He could inspire vision and lead. What they needed was somebody to step in. Here's who we are now. Here's what we're going to do going forward. Here's the relationships we're going to build. And he was incredibly successful.
Right.
So if you're sitting out there looking at an opportunity and thinking, I just really don't know if I fit, and it's something like you were at a $2 million company and this is a $1 billion company, but essentially the same thing, getting that out of your mind. In fact, we always, to the extent possible, will bring a candidate, and at middle level roles, not so much because you kind of have to have the core experience, but certainly senior level, executive level roles, we will always bring somebody who is in every way completely outside of what we were asked for.
Okay.
But what that person's always going to have is a lot of confidence in what, and by the way, confidence is not cockiness, but confidence in knowing what your strengths are that represent a completely different way to approach a job. And I would tell you at least half the time that person ends up getting the job.
Just because the new, I guess,
Well, it's their story wins over. So sometimes it takes the hiring company to see the right thing, to realize, you know what, we actually do need something different. Because oftentimes, this could go on for days of you hire for the person that you're replacing, not for you. So you've got all that. But again, he had a great story, and a story that turned out to be what that organization needed. They didn't know it until they heard the story. But he knew what his story was. He was confident delivering the story, and then once in, he delivered on his story, which is what everybody needs to always be doing. Know your story, know how it fits, and then when given the opportunity, deliver.
Man, Jonathan, I'm really glad we did this today. I think you're, and again, like I think it's such an important, I guess, overlooked or maybe not vocalized part of this process. It's obviously get your resume, get everything in line, get your folder, get your dossier in line with your CV, everything up to date. But it's also taking the personal side of things. What's your story? Talk to people, find it out, pick up the, and you're right. When someone calls you about an opportunity, don't read them your resume. They got your resume. Discuss your story, discuss the value you're going to bring. And I think that's an excellent point, and I think that's something that I haven't heard on this podcast before, and I think that's something to take home. I think it's a great call. Well, Jonathan, everyone again, this is Jonathan Rhoads, a partner at Lowry Rhoads Associates, which is an executive search and human capital consultancy. And if anyone has any questions for him, you can find him on LinkedIn, again, Jonathan Rhoads, and or you can just email us at roundtherotary@cap-petra.com. Again, that's roundtherotary@cap-petra.com. Jonathan, I appreciate you coming in today, man. I think you had a lot of great, valuable stuff to everyone sitting out there right now or in their cars, and maybe find themselves kind of in this, actually, it sounds like this can apply to anybody.
It can. It can apply to anybody. And again, you said it's personal. It is. What's more personal than you?
Yeah.
And then, ultimately establishing a personal relationship with the other person who's looking for somebody to add to their team.
Yeah, absolutely.
But yeah, thanks a lot for having me, JP.
Absolutely, Jonathan. We'll be in touch, and take care. Thank you.